Okay, so thank you everybody for coming to this class. Um, sometimes you teach a class because you're very familiar with something and you want to let other people know about it. And sometimes you teach a class because you know very little about it and you're really, really curious. And that's where this is coming from. So, how many of you have chanted the Great Dharani? I'll change it. Is there anyone who has not chanted the Great Dharani? Okay, if you have not chanted the Great Dharani, I thought of doing it to start the class, but on Zoom it's terrible. You just hear one voice. It would be awful. And so I encourage you to look it up. I know the Quantum School of Zen has recordings of it. Other places might have recordings of it. So I encourage you to look it up and hear what it's like. So what is it? It's a Dharani. And a Dharani can be thought of as a very long mantra, or it could be thought of as a very long collection of mantras strung together. It is dedicated to Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of Compassion, also known as Kuan Yin, also known as Kuan Sheyin, also known as Kannon, also known as Kanzeon in Tibetan, Chenrezig. Okay, so this is a very, very important Bodhisattva. It is chanted, as far as I know, in every Chan, Son, Zen, Tien, that's all the various forms of what we in this country call Zen, in all of those traditions. Plus it's chanted certainly in the Vajrayana, Tibetan tradition, and in other Mahayana traditions as well. It's a very powerful Dharani, and we'll get into that later. And it's accompanied, as many Dharanis are, by a sutra, which is called the Great Compassionate Heart Dharani Sutra. So in the Quantum schools, we call it the Great Dharani. I know that in many Japanese schools, they call it the Great Compassionate Dharani, and so on and so forth. So it has, it's aimed at compassion. Its direction is compassion. Because it's a Dharani, that is either a very long mantra or a string of short mantras, very long string of short mantras, you can't translate it. It's beyond translation. On the other hand, it has a lot of translations. So we'll talk about that. As a practice, this was actually my teacher, Zen Master Sung-san. This was his practice. Doing it silently, perceiving it. He would say he perceived it all at once, perceiving it. I don't think it was actually all at once. I think it took like maybe a few minutes or something. He would perceive it as a whole, silently, of course, no tune, just perceiving the Dharani. And he would do this over and over and over and over. And I believe for pretty much all of his life, all of his practicing life, which started when he was a very young man, that was his practice. The great Tripitaka master, Xuan Hua, who I referred to a lot here, he had a wonderful way of explaining how to practice it. He said, we recite it once and forget it, recite it twice, 3 times, several hundred times, and we still can't remember it. This is forcing it. It is not forced when you can see it once and not forget it, when it passes by your eyes once and is never forgotten, because your wisdom is like a mirror. And I will be referring to him a lot because he has this wonderful book called The Great Dharani. And I can't give you a link to it because it's unobtainium. It was published by I think they call themselves the Buddhist Translation Society. It's published by the City of 10,000 Buddhas, which he founded and was his major center in the United States. And they no longer have it available for purchase. It has not been pirated by the Terabus website, so you can't go to Terabus and download a PDF. And I don't know if you know about Terabus.Huterebess. They pirate all kinds of things and they make them available for free. And it's kind of illegal, but when things are out of print, it's a really nice service that they do. And what I do is, if I can, I buy the book and then I can refer to Terabus. I can do a search thing on Terabus. Then I feel okay about it. Anyway, so, and then if you go to Amazon, you'll discover that it is available for $500 a used copy, which means it's not really available. Somebody's just going to steal your money. Anyway, so I mentioned it's a powerful Dharani, so I want to tell a story that Zen Master Songhyang, Barbara Rhodes, everyone calls her Bobby, who is the head of the Quantum School of Zen. She has this wonderful, wonderful story. When she was a young nurse, she was a nurse, and when she was a young nurse and she was assigned to night duty, where she had to be the night nurse watching this one patient who is in a coma. And you have to turn them in the bed every couple of hours so they don't get bed sores and so on and so forth. So that was her job that night. And she didn't understand that he was a big, big mafia boss. So she did that for 1 or 2 nights, and she was having a hard time staying awake. And so she asked Master Sung-san, she said, what can I do to stay awake? He said, chant the Great Dharani, practice the Great Dharani silently, of course, but practice the Great Dharani. So she did, and so she sat there, watching her patient and inside going, Shimyan Chanku Dharani, like that. And so this guy's been in coma like for days or weeks for a long time. And suddenly he sits up. He sits up and he says, "Whatever you're doing, stop it!" And then he goes back into his coma. And so she went to Zen Master Sung-san and said, "Whoa, what was this?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, very bad man. He's fighting demons. And the demons don't like this mantra. And, he doesn't like this mantra. So, this mantra, people with demons don't like this mantra." So, anyway, yeah, so that's a cool story. So, yeah, this is a powerful mantra. I mean, here's Bobby didn't make this up. Okay. So, yeah. So what is a Dharani and how are they used? I already said what a Dharani is, a very long mantra or a long collection of short mantras. It comes from the Sanskrit root, and Stan can correct my pronunciation if I get this wrong. D-H-R is how it's spelled, and it means to hold, to keep, to possess, to bear. And so you're holding, you're keeping, you're possessing, you're bearing in the sense of, a burden, not in the sense of an animal. It's just, as I've already said, it's a very strong spiritual practice. It's a method of meditation. It's a chant that we do as part of our standard chant. Other people do it as part of their standard chants, or they may do it as for special ceremonies. It's also, I found this interesting, used as a mnemonic device, and I'm not sure what that means. It was just listed somewhere. Oh, it's a mnemonic device. So I'm not sure what that means. And it is, and I will talk about this a lot, it is a sort of magic spell. It's a kind of invocation that can make things happen, which is what a magic spell is. And some of the academic literature on Dharanis in the West calls them spells. It doesn't call them Dharani, it just calls them spells, which, it's ignoring sort of the point, which is waking up. That's sort of the point of practice, is waking up. It's not about, making your glass of water float in the air or something like that. But anyway, and as I've already said, these Dharanis and mantras are without meaning. They're beyond explanation. You can't look up the words in the dictionary and find out what they're saying. On the other hand, they're also translated and they're explained. And about a third of this book is an explanation, translation, and explanation of this mantra. And you can find a bunch of translations online. For everyone on screen who does this chant or does this as a practice, it's a practice. It's the same direction as all practices. But as I said, most of the literature focuses on its efficacy as a spell. And there's 2 scholars that I'm relying on a lot. One is named Paul Kopp, and the other is Richard McBride. And Paul Kopp has a very academic and comprehensive and very good definition of a Dharani. It's a carefully, I'm quoting now, a carefully structured text, formalized prayer-like expression of desire, whose images and phrases resound throughout Buddhist doctrinal literature, framing a performative narrative whose principal trope and action in the ritual hall is consecration. So performative narrative means when it's being used as in some kind of magic way, you'll see it's combined with certain like stagecraft directions. The spoken tones of the spell, he doesn't say Dharani, anoint and empower those who come into contact with them through a kind of synesthetic blending. And I want to talk a little bit about this anoint and empower. It's what's happening in a Dharani, whether you're just practicing it as practice or whether you're practicing it with some kind of, ulterior motive, some kind of purpose, like making my glass of water float in the air. The power comes from the connection with the Bodhisattva or the Buddha that the Dharani is dedicated to or is embodying. So in this case, it's Avalokiteshvara. So the power comes because you are connecting with this Bodhisattva, and as a practice, you are becoming this Bodhisattva. So we don't practice the Great Dharani, we don't chant Kwanseum Bosal, which is another way we invoke Avalokiteshvara, in order to ask for a favor. We want that Bodhisattva to enter us. We want to become that Bodhisattva. So I wanted to say that. Now, I had always thought of the magic part as sort of something that's long ago and far away. And I was quite surprised to read Richard McBride's article that it is incredibly popular in 21st century Korea. Somehow in the beginning of 21st century Korea, a whole bunch, you don't have to take notes, Jenny, because I'm going to post my notes. A whole bunch, and also we're going to have this appear in a record and in a video. A whole bunch of books appeared, handbooks on how to use various Dharanis and various mantras. And one that's devoted to this one has a great title, Devotional Methods for the Realization of One's Desires That You Can Do Even by Yourself. So all of a sudden, there's these handbooks that are appearing in 21st century Korea about using mantras and Dharanis in order to get various kinds of results. And I'll quote Richard McBride. So drawing, and it's not all of a sudden, it's drawing on, as Richard McBride said, drawing on long-standing traditions, contemporary promoters of the ritual application of Dharanis assert that aspirants will not forget the Buddhist teachings, will attain enlightenment quickly, will overcome all manners of disasters and calamities, and get rid of all manner of karmic obstacles if they memorize the Dharanis and perform them. And notice how this starts, will not forget the Buddha's teachings. So this is, about practice. Will attain enlightenment quickly. This is about practice. And then we have overcoming disasters and calamities, getting rid of all manner of karmic obstacles if they memorize them. And so these handbooks, what they recommend is to attain specific goals, do this or do that. And they'll take like a little part of the Dharani, a little mantra from the Dharani, and they'll say, this one will, you'll do well in school, or that one, you'll get a lot of money, or this one over here, your kid will, marry well, that kind of thing. So they're very, very sort of practical, and very sort of pointed at particular goals, which it's easy to sneer at, but people need all the help they can get. And it's always important to remember that they only work because of the power and sincerity of practice and the practitioner's connection to the Bodhisattva or Buddha of the mantra. That's not McBride, that's me. I'm not sure how much McBride understands that, but if anything like this, works, Am I going to sneeze? Maybe not. If anything like this works, it works because of the connection to practice and the connection to the particular bodhisattva or Buddha that the mantra is dedicated to. So this particular Dharani is focused on Avalokiteshvara. And if you think about the chants in the Quantum School of Zen, if you think about chants in other Zen schools and other Buddhist schools, many chants are dedicated to, focused on invoking Avalokiteshvara. In the Quantum School of Zen, there are essentially 3 chants that we do daily, and in the morning and at night, and 3 of them are dedicated to Avalokiteshvara. And, the Heart Sutra, the Great Dharani. Oh, no, sorry, just 2 of them are dedicated. The Heart Sutra and the Great Dharani, there's only 3 chants because one of them is done twice in different languages. And then in the early evening chanting, that's the 10,000 Eyes and Hands Sutra, which is not only embodying Avalokiteshvara, but it also includes the Great Dharani in it. And then also we do Kwansen Boso chanting. And those are the only 2 that we do there. So of the daily chants in the Quantum School of Zen, of the 5 daily, then there's bell chants. So the bell chants are not, but the 5 regular chants, 4 of them are dedicated to Avalokiteshvara. So who is Avalokiteshvara and where does Avalokiteshvara come from? Notice I avoided a pronoun because Avalokiteshvara is male and Kuan Yin is usually presented as female, so that's nice. So classically, Avalokiteshvara's origin is a ray of light emanating from, and according to Wikipedia, is the right eye of Amida Buddha. I had heard there was a tuft of hair between the eyebrows, but Amida Buddha is ray of light appears, and that ray of light produces Avalokiteshvara. So Avalokiteshvara iconographically has a crown, and an image of Amida Buddha appears in the crown. The Chinese story is that it was a very devout princess, Miao Shan, who was about to enter nirvana and then heard the sounds of the world and said, oh, I can't do this. I have to help all these people. And so became Kuan Yin. And both Avalokiteshvara and Kuan Seyin, which is or Kuan Sheyin, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, both mean perceive world sound. You hear the sound of the world and your compassion is awakened. So that's the meaning of the name. And then there's this very interesting book. I don't know how I fell into this book. Actually, I can share it on the screen because I made an image of it. So it's Lokesh Chandra, a scholar in India, a Hindu scholar in India, the 1,000-Armed Avalokiteshvara. And you can see it's a huge book. And so he's a Hindu practitioner who is a very well-known scholar of Buddhism in India. And he says that Avalokiteshvara is a transformation of Brahma, became an independent deity, acquired attributes of the twin gods Hari and Hara, which becomes Hari Hara 1, also associated with Shiva in Nepal. Now, when I don't know how I came across this book, and it was a very long time ago, and when I first read that, I thought, oh, this is the whole thing of, people, Hindus saying that Buddhism is just a branch of Hinduism. But then, preparing for this class, I realized, no, it's not doing that. He's talking anthropologically how this was produced. And you have to understand, Buddhism did not come out of Hinduism. Hinduism came out of Vedic practices, Vedic, and Buddhism arose at the same time as these Vedic practices. And so Buddhism was developing at the same time that Hinduism was developing, and there was a back and forth between them. We have at some point, it's at various times in various ceremonies, all of a sudden you invoke a Hindu god or something, right? And when Buddha woke up, it was a Hindu god who came down and said, hey, Buddha, teach people, please, So So there is this interplay, and that's really what Lokesh Chandra is talking about. And the way he puts it, and again I'm quoting, when Buddhism had to find a vitalizing synthesis of the state and scriptures, that's an interesting thing, the state, the government, the assimilation of Harihara into the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara was a natural step. So, okay. Now, let me talk about next part is about the Dharani Sutra. So many Dharanis are associated with sutras, and these sutras have basic elements. And these elements, it's not first this, first this, for this, for this. They go back and forth. But the 4 elements, first of all, you always have to talk about the importance of the Dharani. Now, any sutra, you always talk about the importance of the sutra. It's always there. In this case, you're talking about the importance of the Dharani, because the sutra is about the Dharani. If you chant this sutra, the Lotus Sutra, they all have it. If you chant this, then all beings will awaken and all this kind of stuff. So you have to talk about the importance of the Dharani. And I'm using Chan Master Hua's translation. There are other translations that you can find, but I kind of like that one. So an example of that, were I to praise extensively the power of this mantra, I could not exhaust its praise until the end of time. So that's an example of the importance of it. And then spiritual prerequisites. Not anybody can do this. You have to be worthy. You have to be a good person. That guy in a coma, that mafia boss, if he chanted the Great Dharani, it wouldn't help him. Because he's a mess, So here's a quote, again, from this Dharani Sutra. If a good man, and again I'm quoting Tripitaka Master Hua's translation, if a good man or good woman recites, and I love they include women, if a good man or good woman recites and holds the spiritual mantra, they should bring forth a great and vast Bodhi heart, vowing to take all beings across. That is, you become Avalokiteshvara. They should personally observe the precepts and the rules of pure eating. In East Asia, there are very strict rules, not just vegetarianism. No alliums, no something else. There's a whole bunch of foods you're not supposed to eat. And I remember we were in Taiwan and people were shocked that we ate onions. Garlic. But anyway, okay. So they should personally observe the precepts and the rules of pure eating. And with respect to all beings, they should give rise to a heart of equality, reciting the mantra constantly without interruption. Having bathed and put on clean clothing, they should dwell in a clean room. There they should hang banners, light lamps, and make offerings of incense, flowers, and 100 flavors of food and drink. They should regulate their minds to one point with no other conditions and recite and hold the mantra in accordance with Dharma. So that's sort of the prerequisites for practicing with the Great Dharani. It's interesting because you're reciting the mantra constantly while you're preparing to recite it, but good, okay. Then spiritual power to be gained. So a very partial list that you can find in the sutra will fulfill the 6 perceptions quickly. I'm not sure if that's a typo or not. Maybe they meant the first six perfections, but anyway, will fulfill something important quickly. The heart of Bodhi will be brought forth quickly. Arhats, not fully enlightened, will be enlightened quickly. Living beings will have their great vehicle seeds and Dharma sprouts grow. So, and that's just a partial list of the spiritual. I don't want to quite use the word benefits, because if you are benefiting from these things, you don't care about benefits anymore. But a very partial list of spiritual powers, spiritual openings that can be gained. And you notice a lot of them have the word quickly. So the idea is you can, some practices are slower than others. This is a very powerful practice that will get you wherever it is that it gets you, which of course is no place. It will get you there quickly. And now now we come to the sort of popular magic kind of stuff. This is not just that the Dharani itself is magical, but also that the sutra talks about this. So, and that's a large part of the sutra. So here's an example. Ghosts and dragons spread virulence, causing bleeding boils and festering ulcers, so the pain cannot be borne. Say the great compassion mantra with extreme sincerity. 3 puffs, the poison is expelled, gone without a trace. So that's a fairly simple thing. You just have to say it with great extreme sincerity, as if extreme sincerity is easy to do, but you say it with extreme sincerity, 3 puffs, and the poison is expelled, gone without a trace. The next example that I'm giving, and there are many, many, I mean, I don't know how many examples, scores of examples, is more typical, which is that there's kind of a sort of ceremonial, performative aspect to it. If you become possessed by a cat, just an interesting thing to be concerned about. If you become possessed by a cat, take the syllables Mili Chano, which is a mantra from the Chinese version of the Dharani, and burn it to ashes. So you write it out and you burn it to ashes. Mix the ashes with clean mud and mold them into the shape of a cat. Before a 1,000-eyed image, so you have to have an image of the, the great, so Avalokiteshvara has 1,000 hands, and each hand is an eye. So actually, Avalokiteshvara has 1,002 eyes because he also has these eyes. So you have to have an image of that bodhisattva, and in front of that image, you mantra a fine quality steel knife. Now, mantra as a verb means you recite the mantra over the object. So you mantra a fine quality steel knife 108 times as you slice the statue into 108 sections, saying the mantra once over each slice. Call the cat's name once after you've done that, and it will leave and never return again. So that's a kind of sample of the sort of performative use of a mantra, where it's not just that you recite the mantra, but also that you have instructions of what you're supposed to do. And as I said, there are many, many, many examples in this, but there's even one for a difficult childbirth, which I thought was kind of sweet. That cared about women. Okay, that's nice. Okay, so now let's talk about the Dharani linguistically. And the section in my notes says translations, or is it translations of the Dharani? So the source is Sanskrit. We know that. Sanskrit syllables in mantras and Dharanis are often deliberately meaningless or so cosmic, for example, Om, that they can't be captured in ordinary semantics. Now, some of them we know, like Namu means homage to. Okay, that's fine. But Om, you can't define Om. You can try, but you can't really define it. So our chant is an English transliteration of the Korean transliteration of the Chinese translation of Sanskrit syllables, and the original Sanskrit has disappeared. So everybody's working from a transliteration, or a transliteration of a transliteration, or a transliteration of a transliteration of a transliteration, and you can go on ad infinitum. All translation claim that they have recovered, they've backsourced the original Sanskrit. They looked at whatever they're looking at, and they figured out what the original Sanskrit was. So it's reconstructed from some kind of transliteration, from Siddham, and I have to explain what Siddham is, or Chinese, Tibetan, Hangul. I don't think anyone has tried to do this from English, transliterations. But so I have to explain what Siddham is. So this mantra starts as Sanskrit, and Buddhism goes to China, and people don't know how to read Sanskrit, but you have these translators, these people coming from India doing this translation thing, and they create a script called Siddham. I think it was in the 6th century that they did this, so it was pretty late. And Siddham is a syllabary. So like ba, not b, ah, like we have 2 letters. It's a syllabary. Ba would be an example. So you have a character, a script thing. It's not exactly a letter. It's not exactly a character. You have some kind of symbol that you know to pronounce ba. But because it's a syllabary and it's not Sanskrit, and they teach it to the Chinese and the syllabary that they've developed, or maybe they developed it with the Chinese. Anyway, so the syllabary develops and people can pronounce the syllables, great. But in pronouncing the syllables, they lose it, syllable, 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 syllable. So they are no longer cohering as words. So for example, take the name, not a very good example, Michael. I'll pronounce it Michael. Michael. Is that Michael or is it my kill? Like a hunter. That's my kill, right? So that's how it works. By creating the Siddham script, you've lost any meaning that could come from the Sanskrit, except things like Namu, which, they retain their meaning because they're used so often and they have a specific thing. So semantical congruence is lost. And then you add these intervening scripts, especially Chinese, because Chinese characters, the character itself has a meaning. So you take this Siddham, and then, because most people didn't read Siddham either, you put it into Chinese characters. And so someone's standing there with a chanting book and they're looking at the Chinese characters, and each character has a meaning. But the meanings have nothing to do with the original Sanskrit because it's there for the sound. And so then that becomes to leak into the consciousness of the person chanting. And so you create tremendous amounts of ambiguity. So again, Tripitaka Master Hua, he's so great. I love him. I wish you could all find this book. It's so great. He writes, he says, to be perfectly frank, there isn't anyone who knows how to explain it. There isn't anyone who knows, in the end, just what the Great Compassion mantra is all about, or how to translate it. Of course, he has a translation, right? Then how do you know, you ask? Don't ask me how. I don't ask you, so you shouldn't ask me. How do I know? Of course I know. If I didn't, I wouldn't be able to explain it to you. So don't ask me how I know. Instead of asking me how I know, ask yourself, how come you don't know? If you know why you don't know, then you will know how I come to know. On the other hand, if you don't know why you don't know, you won't be able to know how come I know. That is precisely what makes it wonderful. Isn't that great? Okay. So, see, I think I seem to have skipped something here. So there are a number of, as I said, there are a number of translations, and the translations tend to be very straightforward. Let me see. Got one here, like D.T. Suzuki, sort of a part of it. Move, my defilement-free seal. Come, hear, a joy springs up in me. Speak, directing. Hulu, mala, hulu, hile. Sara, siri, suru, be awakened. Have awakened, O merciful one, blue-necked one, daring ones, and so on and so forth. So it's very straightforward, But Tripitaka Master Hua does not do this. He goes back to the really old Chinese tradition, and there are other examples of this. If you look up Dharanis and you look at academic articles about them, and they go to the old stuff, what they do is they do phrase by phrase explication with alternative meanings, because remember I said this whole thing is very ambiguous. So with alternative meanings interspersed with Dharma instruction stories, magic references, superpower references, references to particular hands and eyes of the Bodhisattva, like the jeweled bow hand, the blue lotus eye, etc. References to various hearts like the unconditioned, undefiled, and unattached. I'm telling you, this is a great book, and I wish we had it accessible. So for an example, Swope means Saha, as in the Saha world. It means worthy of being endured. It means enduring and loving. It means good speech. It means good arrival. So these two syllables have all these meanings ascribed to it. So if you would try to give like a sort of straightforward translation from Tripitaka Master Hua's book, you'd have to sort of go your way through them. And I actually did it sort of as an exercise because another teacher who's interested in this asked me to do this, not in the Quantum School of Zen. And so I sent it to him because he doesn't have access to this book, right? So he can't do it himself. Then an example of the magical power. So let's go to Mohe Fashe Yedi. If your country is about to be invaded and you cultivate this Dharma, you can, without any outward manifestation, cause the enemy to retreat.
Ah.
So, yeah, isn't that nice? So, so in the Dharani, the instructions that are given to how to use it as magic are not as complex as in the commentary on the sutra. In the commentary on the sutra, you have all these things about taking mud and making a statue of a cat and so on and so forth. But in the Dharani, it's very straightforward. Take this little mini mantra from the Dharani and then do it, with sincerity and full focus, all your attention on it, and then this will happen. In this case, it's your country is about to be invaded, and you cultivate this Dharma, you can, without any outward manifestation, cause the enemy to retreat. Okay. Xuanhua never, never, never loses sight of the practice aspects of this. Even with all the, things about getting rid of a cat spirit or getting rid of various diseases or whatever it is. He never, never, never loses sight. One short quote, conduct means cultivation. Every day you should be more vigorous and energetic. Hear that, all you old people? Every day you should be more vigorous and energetic. As you bring forth a courageous and vigorous heart to cultivate the way, you do not retreat in conduct. If you cultivate the non-retreating gold wheel hand and eye, from now right up until the time you realize Buddhahood, you will not retreat, but you must cultivate. So, constant exhortations to practice without this sort of what's the word I want? Kind of focused desire of what you want to come out of practice. So, that went faster than I thought. Let me give my conclusion. What is the Great Dharani? I don't really know. For well over 1,000 years, it has been central to many forms of Buddhist practice. It is pointing to something we can't name in ways that can't be conventionally explicated. As that mafia boss knew, it is strong and powerful and cuts through our many demons. And I encourage everyone to practice, to chant this Dharani, to enter into it with a strong don't know mind and see what happens. And that's the end. God, I thought this would take like 2 hours and I did it so fast. That's the end of my part. Now, are there any questions, any comments, any experiences people have had? Reddit says, oh, we have questions. Okay. Why don't you put the hands up and then I can see the order in which people are doing it. So you know how to do that, the hand up? Is it possible? Okay, so Reddit made a comment. Is it possible not to post this part of the workshop? Oh, I see. Okay, let's talk about that. So do people want, um, I would like to post this part of the workshop because things are going to come out of it. However, what I can do is if you have a really personal thing, put it in the chat and then I'll respond to it in the chat and then no one will hear your voice, no one will know who it's coming from. Okay? So that's how we'll handle it. And Liz has raised her hand. So Liz, where are you? Liz, yes, please say something, ask something.
Okay, so I'll just ask one question and then have others. But so is it possible in your research, did you find that, like, for instance, Om or the Great Dharani, that perhaps at the time that it really did have a meaning, but that meaning just can't be translated because there's just a lot of history that's been lost in the language and the beliefs of the time, and so there just is no English equivalency because the understanding that
Yeah.
there's just a lot of difference between if you read novels from somebody who was raised in Japan.
Mhm.
It's a different field than the US. So that,
We don't have an English word for Schadenfreude. We have to take the German word, right? Yeah. Okay. Um, so some things like Om, I don't think ever had a standard lexical meaning. There's some syllables that are considered to have power just on their own. And I don't know how much of the mantra is like that. There are other things that, like we know what Namu is. We know what that is. And there are other things that might have that kind of meaning where you can say, oh, yeah, I know what that means if you knew the Sanskrit. And there's a mix. There's a mix of those. So they're powerful syllables that on their own right carry power. And then there are things that have more standard meanings. And since we don't have the Sanskrit, I don't know which is which. And then you also asking a question, a cultural question, like I said, Schadenfreude is a German word that we use to mean when that bad person. I'm so happy because things happen to that person I don't like. So it's not part of the English language yet. Someday it might be. But so yeah, so there's also this, one language has words for things that another language doesn't, and vice versa. So, but since we don't have the Sanskrit, I don't really know what is what. Um, and then Eric wants to say something. So, Eric, do you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for for the talk. And one question I have is like I'm aware of the differences in versions between different traditions, like and that the Korean version is different than the one, let's say, in the Tripitaka.
Mhm.
And so one thing I haven't been able to find, and I wonder if you know what, like where and when was the Korean version codified? Because Chandra references it in his book. And
Oh, you
um,
have Chandra's book. That is so great.
yeah, and actually, yeah, um, yeah. So I've been like trying to figure some of this out too over the last months, and so I was really excited to see your talk on it. But I'm having trouble connecting it to the Korean Zen lineage of like where was that particular version standardized because it's different than the ones in any of the scripture.
Well, I've also practiced in Japanese centers, and when they chant it, it's different.
Right.
And there are apparently also, thus I have heard, different versions in the same, like, so if you're doing Chinese, a Chinese version in one school of Buddhism might be different from a Chinese version in another. I really don't know where that comes from. I do know that it has to be fairly recent because, it's CE, not BCE. That
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So
Right. But I don't know if it was like from the 1300s or if it's
I have,
something
I
way
have,
more recent.
I have no idea. I would imagine that it goes back fairly far to whenever Buddhism entered a particular country. I would imagine
Okay.
it would do that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anyone's tried tracking that kind of thing. So thank you. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, okay. Yun.
Uh, yeah, China. I mean, okay, the Taiwanese temple. I go here. They don't do Dharani like Providence and Zen school. Our Sungsan's Zen school,
Mhm.
and also Korea also don't have this Dharani. They have a different. It's maybe from a Chinese character or something like that.
Mhm.
And then Tibetan also they have, but not like this. So, but somehow when I went Providence Zen retreat for a week and 5 days, I had just a group chanting with more than 10 people. I just the first time when I went there, the first time I heard the Great Dharani,
Mhm.
I just right away I liked it, and then for a week I just listened on and on and on, and then I just kind of I just I don't know, it just spelled in me. I just so love this Great Dharani, and then a week later after I got home, I had a enormous that experience. Well, I'm not going to go there, but anyway, I think because from this chant, it's
Mhm.
just here. And then I went back again. I had another great experience. So just when I just go to just a big group of people chant together with a meditation, this just worked for me so well. I'm almost like a possessed with that, and I just love it. Uh, so I wish there was a class or just Zoom meeting. We chant all together, but somehow time difference in Korea and America. There is a one class at 5:30 in the morning. It's kind of hard to take that one. I will try to take that one. That's what I would like to share.
Okay, so we chant the Great Dharani as part of regular chanting at our center. We do it on Saturday morning at 6:30, but we also do it on Sunday at 10 as part of our practice.
Good to know that. Okay, Sunday at 10.
Yeah, we do four great vows, three prostrations, and then we do the four chants, which includes the Great Dharani, and then we sit, and then we have a talk, stuff like that. So anyone can join us, but that's just chanting at once. The Quantum School of Zen does these chanting sessions. It's usually Kwansein Bosal chanting, but sometimes it's Great Dharani chanting. Just a few times a year, everyone in the whole world who's affiliated with the Quantum School of Zen has an opportunity to get together. It's usually at 7 in the morning, Midwestern time. You're on Midwestern time. So if you're interested, you can get on the Quantum Zen Online mailing list,
Okay.
and you can find out about that. Also, a friend of ours who's a member of our sangha and a very wonderful person, practitioner, Ed Kanda, found us a house that would be. It's not in the country, but it's sort of like in the country. It's sort of just on the edge of the city, but far away from any other house, where you could do a chanting retreat.
Oh yeah, that's great.
So we're thinking of doing that. We're thinking of doing that sometime in the fall. We have to arrange with the person who owns, who owns the house to see when we could do it. And she built the house with the idea of it's not just my house. I want people to do things here. So I'm hoping that we will do that. What we will, when we do that's called Kido, which means energy way, chanting retreat. And when we do it, we start with a Great Dharani, and then we do Kwansein Bosal chanting, and then Anyway, so yeah, so people, we will not be doing this hybrid because it doesn't work hybrid. But if you are in driving distance and you're on a mailing list and you see, then please join us for that. And now I have a, in the chat, so I won't identify the person. It seems like several people have a strong reaction to the chant when the first few times they hear it, both positive, similar to the person who spoke, and negative, similar to the mafia person. I had a similar experience to the speaker, that is positive, and as you were talking, I felt a sort of relief, which itself feels like sort of attachment to this positive experience. This feels somewhat self-defeating. Do you have any teachings around this? So that's a great question. That's the thing of, I had an experience. Am I done? Or I had an experience. Can you approve it, please? And I'll tell a story about that, which is a long time ago, when I'm so old, it really is a long time ago, when I just started practicing and I was living in the Boston area, and I was spending summers doing research in Berkeley because that's where I got my graduate degree in mathematics. And I stumbled into that there was a new Zen center in the Quantum School of Zen in the Berkeley Hills. So, oh, great. So I actually sort of moved in there, 'cause I could live there for the summer. And Stan joined me later. And anyway, so this guy comes by, and the woman who owned the house and ran the place was named Diana Lynch, and then so people would call and she'd answer the phone and they'd say, I want to see Zen Master Sung San. Okay. And then she'd arrange it. And so this guy calls and he says, I want to see Zen Master Sung San. I had an enlightenment experience which was verified in Japan, and I want him to verify it as well. And so she said, well, I'll see. And she asked Zen Master Sung San, do you want to see this guy? And he said, oh, of course. And so she said, yes, he will see you such and such a time. She hangs up and he says, oh, those are the worst. And what he meant is they're hanging on, they're attached to this experience. And then it gets in the way of actually being awake, So, so don't hang on to these experiences. On the other hand, don't shove them away. Each experience like that is an opening.
Yeah.
And please step through that door. But you don't step through a door and stay in the doorway. You step through it. So if something wakes you up, if something gives you some kind of insight, then use it. Let it absorb it, digest it. So that's my response to that. Hala, you want to know a copy of what? Does anyone have a copy they could drop here? A copy of what? If you want a copy of the chant.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you go to, well, I'll find it. Okay, if you go to Kansas Zen Center, I have to wait for my, okay, go to Kansas Zen Center, and then you go to resources, and then you go to, oh, I can share the page. Let me share the page so you can see what to do. Okay, share page. Bing, 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 bing. Okay, so I went to Kansas Zen Center, then I went to resources, and then I go to resources, and I scroll, and I see Quantum School of Zen chanting, and there you will see the Great Dharani if you just keep going. Okay, whoops, I went past it. So there it is. Okay, 2 pages. And you notice that it's not translated, whereas the other ones do have what's called interlinear translation. And it's not translated because it's a Dharani, it's a mantra. So, yeah, so that's how you can find it. Okay, let's see. Carol?
A comment, in the Soto school,
Mm-hmm.
we say that I fell in love with it immediately and memorized it right away, and yeah, it was easy for me. But anyway, in the Soto school, we usually do it in the evenings.
Mm-hmm.
It's like not done at morning service or noon service, but it's always done in the evening service. And
Mm-hmm.
also, when somebody dies and we're having a service for that person, as
Mm-hmm.
the Heart Sutra, we will do the Daishin Dharani very slowly, much
Ah,
more
interesting. Okay, thank you.
than that.
Liz.
One more thing, we used to, when I was at ZCLA, some of us would get into a prideful place with it, like pride, because how fast we could do it.
Oh yeah, yeah. When you do it as a meditation practice, or you're doing it silently, yeah, right. You get into this thing of, well, I did it in 8 minutes. Well, I did it in 5 minutes. Well, I did it in 4 minutes. You sort of count how many you do, like in a 20-minute session or something, and you figure out how fast you're doing it. Yeah, exactly. And then Kwanzaa Boso chanting, which is another, doing that fast silently is another of our practices. You don't actually chant it, you just perceive it, right? And then how many Kwanzaa Boso chants, you do like in a minute. Yeah, people get very competitive. It's amazing, isn't it? Okay, Liz.
Now perceive it, not chant it, and just perceive it. So thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Okay, Liz.
So the question would be kind of the opposite of the one about, the positive feeling. I mean, I like the Dharani, and I do, that is the one chant that I chant if I'm practicing on my own as part of my home practice. But I like it because it doesn't have any meaning. And so then, my focus is more, and I'm not looking at what it means and thinking, oh, that's nice. Oh, oh yeah, that's cool. You know, um, and there's nothing magical that ever happens to me with it. It's just the chant. I mean, and so part of me, as you were talking, I was like, well, maybe I don't do it with enough sincerity because
It's perfect.
it seems,
The meanings are bogus. They're inherently bogus. It can't be translated.
no, but I mean, maybe because I don't feel that positive energy or, uh,
Don't
there's nothing negative, but
don't
there's nothing positive
don't
either.
check, don't check, don't check, don't check. So people have this idea of like an enlightenment experiences where all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, come down and stuff. But people can awaken just by picking up one foot and putting it down, and nothing happens, but suddenly the whole world shifts. And there's nothing you can point to. Or maybe the world doesn't even have to shift. These experiences, they're only tools. They're useful. But the point is waking up. Wake up, helpless world. If you are awake and if you're helping, then you don't need anything else. You don't need the whole universe to, suddenly shimmer and enter into you and you are one and blah, blah. You don't need that. Some people it happens to, and some people it doesn't happen to, and it absolutely doesn't matter. Don't ever compare your practice to somebody else's practice. Don't ever do that. Okay? Yeah. Thank you. Carrie.
Thanks. I remember Stan telling a story once about asking Sun Nim about what his how he did the Great Dharani. He said that that Sun Nim could do it in 45 seconds. Just
Yeah.
in it.
So
5
you
seconds.
have to say Zen Master Sung San because not everybody here knows who Sun Nim is.
Yeah, Zen Master Sung San did it in 45 seconds, and I remember him saying he was I think he was at a retreat with somebody, and they're driving home from the retreat and decided to try to do that, and just said, ended up kind of looking at each other and going, "Wow, what a practice!"
Stan, you want to say anything about that? Okay. You want to say you were young and foolish? Stan was young and foolish. Okay.
And then, not to be competitive or anything, I've tried to do it as fast as I can. I've gotten down to a minute and a half.
Wow, that's pretty good.
45 seconds seems impossible. So that when you said that he just perceives it instead of like doing it,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions or James?
When I was in, after I left Talmasa, I went to Phoenix and I was going to a bodega, which was owned by some Korean people. And I had to pick something up there. And when I called to get directions, I said, Yoboseo. And when I got there, she said, oh, I thought that was your brother. That was her brother. And so I was telling her, no, I had studied with a Zen master from Korea, and she didn't understand anything. And then I said a little bit of the Dharani, and she went, and I didn't realize that somebody told me a few days later that in South Korea, most of the people were Christians, that they weren't mostly.
Actually, it's not. It's a plurality of Christians. The
Yeah.
group is no religious affiliation.
Right. So she knew something about it that scared the heck out.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And this makes even more sense to me now after all those years of that experience. I never forgot about it. That's all I wanted.
So did she give you what you went to pick up?
I had to pick up some stuff it was a liquor store with herbs and all different stuff.
Oh, okay. So she didn't poison the beer.
No.
Okay. All right. Eric.
Hi. I was just thinking, or I'm wondering that some of the books that you referenced, like the McBride and others, are
They're
texts
academic articles.
and in English. And my question is, are you aware of a center, like there might be a lot more research being done currently in like with a bigger language barrier, like at a university in China or somewhere else where there might be more there that is just inaccessible to us.
Absolutely.
And if so, is there a particular university or teacher that comes to your mind as saying like, oh, if we wanted to go deeper, so-and-so, but you'd need a translator.
If I knew, I would have said something already. Yeah.
Fair enough. All
Right. And it's also evident in some of these academic articles that the people, they're really looking at it as an outsider, that they do not get the practice element at all. That's
Yep.
very clear in some people, that they're just coming from the outside. Yeah, I am sure that there is a voluminous literature in Korean, a voluminous literature in Chinese, voluminous literature in Tibetan, maybe in Japanese, I don't know, but it's not a voluminous literature in English. Although I'm sure there are many more articles than I found, but yeah, right. Maddie's mentioned that you heard that sometimes I've pictured a snake when I was chanting the Great Dharani as a snake image from the Hindu Vishnu origin of the Dharani. I don't know. The snake. So when I first started chanting this, I would chant it and I would just sort of see this very large snake kind of moving the way snakes move, And then later I discovered that that Lokesh Chandra's translation has a snake in it. So I thought, oh, that's cool. But yeah, it's just, it's just something about it that, and it's interesting because it's exactly the same tune. It's exactly the same notes musically as when we do the Sino-Korean version of the Heart Sutra. I never see a snake when I do the Sino-Korean version of the Heart Sutra. So I don't know. There we go. Okay, and Ursula got the time wrong, and so I'm sorry, Ursula. Anyway, okay. Yeah, let's see. Are there any other questions or comments or? Yes,
I
Yuna.
wonder if Kansas Zen Center going to have maybe more than a 2 days retreat, like a 3 days or something like that, or
So this is certainly something before COVID we did 2 5-day retreats a year.
Mhm.
COVID, when I said, okay, we're going to do a 5-day retreat, we need, you need at least 4 people to do a multi-day because of the jobs, and I could not find 4 people. But then when I made it a 2-day retreat, all of a sudden I have like 10 or 15 people. So
Okay.
I'm going to encourage people to sign up for a 5-day retreat at some point. We would do them in January and in July because those are months when people don't have a whole lot of other obligations. So yeah, I hope that we do multi-day retreats more than 2 days sometime in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe at least 3 days or something like that. I mean, I will try to go 2
I hope
days.
so. I hope so. I hope so. I know it's a long drive for you, so yeah. I will do my best, I promise.
Thank you.
The few people who are here from Kansas Zen Center, you just heard what Yun said. We want a longer retreat. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, wow, we're finishing ahead of time. So thank you, everybody. This was quite wonderful, and we will post the recording. I have a whole bunch of recordings to post, but this will be one of the ones that gets posted. And I also have notes, which I'll post, that are, actually written like in sentences that people can make sense of. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Judy.